In your opinion, how has the world of Aikido changed and developed?
Mm. So I started in 1985, and I've known people who started earlier than I. So some of this is my own experience and what I've heard from others. Aikido, like most martial arts, was a pretty male-centered art. So one change is how it has become more open to women. Now, surprisingly, it has always, well, maybe not always, but it has been open to women, but in the early days they sort of had a women's Aikido and a men's Aikido. So the men's Aikido was the bang bang, kind of Budo sense, and the women's Aikido was gentler and almost more like a dance. By the time I came on the scene, I was the beneficiary of women before me who were pushing to be treated like an equal and not like a doll or something fragile. And so these were women who refused to wear the hakama, which is the bifurcated skirt thing that usually black belts, wear. Women were allowed to wear it before they became black belts as for modesty's sake. But if you had the only men who are wearing hakama are black belts, and all women are wearing hakama, they could have just started a week ago or something along that line. Someone watching it or looking, and it's women's abilities seem to be all over the place, whereas the male black belts seem to at least have some sense of what they were doing. And it kind of gave I think, a false impression of who the people were on the mat, which affected those who were watching and wanted to join and the like. And it continued this sense of kind of the marginalization of women within the art. So by the time I came along, there were these incredible, strong women. Sue Hall, a former chief instructor of Harvard Aikikai, was a big one who actually pushed for these changes. They made it a little easier for me to be able to be who I was, like a little bit more acceptable. Which is to say, there was still a lot of battles to be fought in 1985. But the major, I think, difference in between then and now is the sense of maybe growing acceptance to everybody who joins, the community, and not to feel as though folks are, in different levels or the like. That's one. The other big one, I would say, is particularly with the growth of computers and social media and what have you, that there are fewer people who are coming to the martial arts regardless of what the martial art is. There's so many more things that folks are doing, and for those who are stuck playing Minecraft or whatever the latest video game is, they're not getting out of the house, they're not getting exercise, they're not engaged with other people, they're losing a sense of physical community. They may have online community, but they don't have sort of a physical community. And I think that this is going to be interesting to see how this is going to play out in our society as we move forward. These smaller communities, whether it's a bowling league or, doing Aikido, these are folks who are learning how to work together, how to fight, together, how to interact together, who are reading body language, who are having a sense of belonging to something larger than just their individual selves. Where we appear to be moving as a larger society is moving towards a type of individualism at the very wrong time, at a time when we need to get back together to deal with the environment, to deal with refugee issues, to deal with the lack of water that a lot of countries are facing. All of these things are just going to create more conflict, more war. We're seeing these wars already occurring in places throughout the world. this is going to try to answer these problems are going to require a global response. And if we're all sitting in our own little, homes, playing with ourselves essentially, and not fully interacting with one another, it's going to make trying to find a solution to these problems very difficult. I don't know if that gets to the to the heart of the question, but
It gets to part of it at the very least. Your first, you had two answers, and the first one was definitely relevant. So, switching tracks a little bit, what do you think are the biggest challenges of being a university club chief instructor?
Sure. All your best students graduate. They keep graduating and going away. So you really have to essentially be prepared for, you may just have these folks for a year, a senior who starts. At best, maybe, 4 years for someone who's there for their entire time. If you're really lucky, you have folks that stick around a little, longer, so you have that ability to, continue to work with a group. But from a teacher's point of view, you also keep losing your senior students. And the nice thing about being in a dojo that has a community of senior students who have been there for longer than 4 years, for decades even, you have folks who have an institutional memory that they pass on, to their fellow students, to their junior students. But again, brings, people in. When you're always sort of starting new, every year, it feels like you're almost starting from scratch again. It's hard to kind of get to the point where you can really begin to teach the secret, techniques, or the more difficult techniques, because the students, frequently their abilities haven't reached that point where they can really absorb what it is that you're teaching. So I would say that's, from a teacher, I would find that to be the most difficult, part. That just as the folks are getting ready, they're graduating. The good thing is that if they continue their Aikido, you're sending out really wonderful people to other dojos who, they can continue their practice there and bring a little bit of the club with them. That club spirit and the really sense of family, I would say. It's something that I've loved about Harvard Aikikai, is that sense of family where people are, constantly helping one another and making friends for life and stuff like that. Something that gets harder and harder to do as you become an adult, to be able to have those sort of relationships. I guess that's something that's special about Aikido.
So that's actually a perfect segue, / you kind of already answered this next question. When you send a student out from a university club, what are you hoping their new sensei will find in that student?
Really the beauty of that individual. I would say that's my first feeling, that the new instructor will really see what we saw as instructors. On a more surface level, that they have the etiquette, that they know when to bow, how to, act, how to give, how to help others, how to be sort of a team player, how to insinuate themselves in a positive way in the dojo. Because when you have a small club, everyone has wearing a lot of hats, and that means everyone is giving a lot back to the club and to each other. And it's something that's pretty special. So sending someone out who can continue that is pretty wonderful from an instructor's point of view, particularly when those other senseis call you up and say, "Oh my God, keep sending me your students when they graduate." I mean, they just love Harvard Aikikai students. So we have a pretty good reputation in the community. That's pretty nice to hear.
Great. What advice would you give What advice would you give to university students who are thinking about starting Aikido or who have just started?
of touched a little bit on this before. To be patient with themselves. You know, if you join karate, you learn how to punch, you learn how to kick. You know, there are several different kinds of punches and several different kinds of kicks and combinations of punches and kicks. But, you know, and yeah, I obviously have to be able to do these things, but it's pretty simple. The punching and the kicking. Aikido's not simple. You know, something that you thought you mastered actually maybe your first month in Aikido, you learn 20 years later, wow, you're still learning how to do this even better. Because it really requires understanding how people move, skeletal structure, how you can bend and twist and do all of these sorts of things. It forces you to extend yourself into others in order to really learn what it is that you're doing. So if you're just in your head, and particularly if you're a beginning student, it's all about you. Why can't I do this? I'm using the wrong foot again. And she said right, but I keep moving my left foot. Right, it's me, everything that I'm doing wrong. And when you're doing that, you're not learning from your partner who's offering their body to you. So you can figure out, oh, if I turn my hips a little bit more, wow, they're totally off balance. If I drop my elbow, my God, now all at once I'm able to do these things. So these little subtle movements that make it much easier for you to do the Aikido requires you being patient with yourself, less frustrated we're all going to be a little frustrated, but less frustrated when you're struggling to learn something, to trust your partner, and to respect their body. Because you don't want to break your partner while you're trying to figure these things out. And all of that requires extending yourself forward, not just into who you are and what's going on in your world, but to understand at the very least there are two of you. And if you're on a crowded mat, there are a lot of you. And you have to respect the space that's around you, so you're not dropping people on other folks or hurting one another. So for the new student coming in, come in with an open mind, work on being patient with yourself, and work to control your frustration. And all of these things are going to benefit every other aspect of your life, not just what you're doing on the mat, not just what you're doing in the Aikido community, but how you interact with your family, how you interact at work, how you work with folks that you supervise as well as those who supervise you. And the better you are at being able to kind of send yourself out in that sort of way, the better you're going to be at all those other things as well.
Once again, you've kind of started shifting into the next question. This is wonderful. So, as a professor, particularly, what role do you think Aikido can play in a student's general education, and what benefits can he or she gain by that practice?
It was really kind of moving in that direction. Well, particularly for the first year student, everything's new. What's going on? Do I really belong here? I'm the mistake. Particularly at a place like Harvard, where everyone believes they're the mistake that the admissions office made. That's sort of like normal. The 5 people who feel that no, they weren't the mistake, those are not the people you want to hang out with, probably. But for everybody else, it's this fear that some grave mistake was made, and it sort of follows you throughout your time at the school. Similarly, when people ask you where you're going to college, the Harvard answer has always been, in Boston. That folks don't want to even say the word because they are concerned about what they may get back. Oh, you think you're so smart, or Harvard, that the reactions are so over the top that they make a lot of people feel uneasy. But that's normal. Everybody for 600 and since 16, what is it, 36 or something like that. for a very long period of time, this is what people have felt. So you're not the first one to feel what it is that you feel. If you're at some other schools, it's still the same thing. Your first year, you're sort of lost. Part of what you're trying to do your first year in college is to find your place, find where you belong at one of the most difficult times of your development, when you are learning to be an independent player, as you're pushing away from parents and guardians, as you're trying to discover who you are, what your identity, is. As life changes, for some students, it's coming out and becoming gay or lesbian. For others, it may be some other issue that they're dealing with. But that all of this is happening at a really inconvenient moment of time, so you can kind of go back to trying to find that peace within yourself, right? The mindfulness sort of issues. To allow yourself to grow without beating yourself up over the mistakes that you make. To understand that failure is a great teacher. It is a wonderful teacher as long as you get back up. And with Aikido, half the time you're on the ground and you gotta get back up. And that's maybe one of the beautiful things about it, that even when it wasn't a perfect throw or wasn't a perfect fall, you have to get back up and start again. And that really goes, I think, to encourage and grow and sustain the kind of person that you're going to be in the future. One with resilience, love for others, respect for others, and a concern for the larger world.
Wonderful. Well, those are all of our questions. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.